The Old Testament reading is Isaiah chapter 11, beginning with the first verse. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of its roots, and the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord. And his delight shall be the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide by what his ears hear. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall slay the wicked. Righteousness shall be the girdle of his waist, and faithfulness the girdle of his loins. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall feed, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The suckling child shall play over the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as water covers the sea. In that day the root of Jesse shall stand as an ensign to the peoples. Him shall the nations seek, and his dwellings shall be glorious. Please stand now for the reading of the gospel. The gospel reading is from Matthew chapter 3, beginning with the first verse. In those days came John the Baptist, preaching in the wilderness of Judea, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. For this is he who was spoken of by the prophet Isaiah, when he said, 'The voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his paths straight.'" This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. I'm pretty sure I was in the 7th grade when my best friend Carl came over to spend the night. That day, there was a family moving in across the street from us. We'd seen the moving van and so on. Well, about midnight, Carl and I were not falling asleep, and Carl said, "You know that family moving in across the street? I think I saw a girl about our age." I said, I don't remember seeing that. He said, "Let's go see if there is one." And I said, "What?" So he led me across the street. It seemed like a bad idea, but that's always how you get in trouble, isn't it? And we're creeping around the outside of this house, peeking in a window. About this time, Carl says, "You know, my dad, the lawyer, once told me that this place where we are is defined as the apron of the house, and that if you're on the apron of the house, the homeowner can't shoot you and no questions will be asked." And I said, "Why did you bring me to the apron of the house?" And we went back home, sneaking around after dark. When my sister and I would spend time with our grandparents in Oakboro, North Carolina, at the very back of the property there was this shed. It was always so mysterious. The windows were sort of clouded over. We never knew what was in that shed, except when we asked about it, my grandfather always sternly warned us, never go into that shed. Well, this makes children want to go into the shed, of course. So one night we made a compact. After grandparents went to sleep, we sneaked out of the house. We went back to the shed. We're just full. What is in this shed? And we get there and we try the door, and it's locked. And we're looking at the doorknob that was locked and began to turn again, like from the inside. And we sprinted into the house. And we never knew what was inside that house. And you dare not ask, because you weren't supposed to be sneaking around. After dark. I talked to a parent the other day. He told me that his son evidently thought it was a pretty cool idea, after everybody was in bed, to slip out of the window and climb up on the roof of their house and smoke pot. That's a great parental realization, isn't it? I know of a man who, I guess his marriage began to founder when after dinner he would sneak out for a drink. Actually, he stuck out for probably too many drinks. I remember going to a party when I was in high school. Why do you remember these things 40 years later as vividly as if it were yesterday? I remember going to this party and I was full of anticipation. There were cool kids that I was glad that I'd been invited. I was so excited about making new connections with these people. But when I got there, the people that I thought were cool made fun of me. And it hurt so much it was hard to bear staying in the room any longer. So I remember just walking outside behind some bushes and I cried. Like I'd heard boys were not supposed to cry. Sneaking out in the dark. Sometimes you sneak out of your house in the dark, but you're actually still in your bed. I had a dream the other night. I had one of these really vivid dreams. This was great. I dreamed that I was in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I was driving Governor Pat McCrory around in the car. And I was giving him what for political policy. It was a dream. I couldn't help it. Sneaking around after dark. The Bible tells us that there was a man named Nicodemus, and he snuck out one night and he came to Jesus and asked him, "What must I do to have eternal life?" Jesus said all the business about being born again and for God so loved the world. Sneaking around after dark. If you know the movie The Incredibles, Mr. Incredible, Bob Parr, he's supposed to be retired as a superhero, but he sneaks out after dark with his pal Frozone, and they go out and save a few lives and then sneak back into the house. Retired superhero. After midnight on Christmas Eve, there's a lot of sneaking around, isn't there? At least if you have little children in the house, they're sneaking around with potentially noisy things, bicycles and wagons. I remember the year that I'd done like 7 or 8 services all through Christmas Eve. Came home pretty tired. I had one item that required assembly. I opened it up. It was a barn for my daughter's collectible horses. And the directions said, glue these 2 pieces together, wait 60 minutes, and then, and I did the math, and it would take 5 hours which it did, to assemble. Sneaking around. The first church that I served when I got out of school, this was really something. I got there the first night and kind of settled into my house, and I went to bed, and I was asleep, and at midnight there was gunfire. And I went to the window and I peeked out, and there were men surrounding the house shooting guns. This did not happen to me when I came to Myers Park. Thankfully. It's what country people do. It's called a pounding. They come and they fire guns at midnight, and then they come in and they bring sugar and flour and all that stuff that a young single guy had no clue what to do with. It was great. Pounding, sneaking around after dark. St. Nicholas, at Christmas we talk about jolly old St. Nick. The real St. Nicholas used to sneak around. He would go to where poor people lived, and he would find their shoes outside where they were asleep, and he would put little gold coins in their shoes. Then he knew of a family. There was a man, he had 3 daughters, and he had no money to post for a dowry. So those girls would never marry. So he dropped 3 bags of gold over the wall so that the man would have money to pay for his daughters' dowries. Why did St. Nick do this? We don't know. We can't interview him. Did he do it because he was humble himself? Did he do it because he wanted to spare the poor the humiliation of having to ask for charity? Who knows? St. Francis of Assisi used to be invited to dinner parties, and when he would go to the dinner, he'd eat a little, and then he would take the rest of the food and hide it under his robe and ask to be excused. And he would go out of the house, and he would find somebody who was hungry and give them the rest of his food. Catherine Drexel, wealthy heiress of the Drexel fortune. She put down all the money to build Xavier University in New Orleans, which was dedicated to the education of African American and Native Americans. She came to the building dedication, but no one knew that she was there or where the money had come from. She sat in the balcony anonymously, saw the school opening that she had paid for. And now we have the Pope. Last week I mentioned the Pope. I talked about the Pope's car. That was a popular sermon. And I mentioned that the Pope showed up in a Ford Focus. And I predicted then, I said, somebody in this church will tell me they drive a Ford Focus. Sure enough, at noon, I had an email from one of our church members, a photo of him next to his Ford Focus. He's our holiest member, clearly, driving the Ford Focus. Well, with this Pope, the hits just never stop coming, right? This week we learned that this Pope's been sneaking out at night to go give food to the poor. I mean, what is that? The story actually bears some conversation. The Pope has, this is interesting, the Pope has an assistant whose name is Archbishop Konrad Krajewski. And Konrad Krajewski holds the position of almoner. Do you know what an almoner is? The almoner is the person whose job is to be sure the Pope doesn't hang on to too much of his money, but that he gives as much of it as possible away. Now, I think every one of you should have an almoner. And if you don't know an almoner, I will volunteer to be your almoner. I'm very good at this. Call me and say, James, I need to part with my money. I can help you. I'm a veteran at these things. He has an almoner, and Pope Francis has urged him to be more proactive. Now, somebody the other day asked Konrad Krajewski if, when he goes out to serve the poor, if the Pope ever accompanies him. And Krajewski said, next question. I told this to someone, and they said, the Pope should tell everyone that he's doing this. They should have photo coverage of this. But isn't that the reason that the Pope does it secretly at night? It's not about the photo op. It's not about the getting credit. It's just about doing good. It's not about the doing for credit. It's about the doing good. Righteousness. The passages that John read to us are about righteousness. The season of Advent and Christmas are about, we make them about so many things, don't we? But it's about righteousness. And the question that Advent asks you is, are you righteous? And what a hard question to answer, right? Because we know how to answer, am I law-abiding? We know how to answer, am I nice? We know how to answer, is he a great guy? We can do all of that. But are you righteous? And what is righteousness anyway? It's not being smug or perfect or anything else, just being aligned with God, just being in sync with what God is all about. Let me put it to you this way. Righteousness is about what you do in the dark when nobody else is looking. And my question to you today is, what do you do in the dark when nobody else is looking? What do you do when you are sneaking around? What do you do that you won't get caught doing and that you won't get any credit for doing? The whole business of credit actually is interesting. We try to raise money at the church. We could raise a boatload more money if we gave people credit for their giving. If we posted big signs, so like, here's how much people give. We'd raise a lot more money. Mike King, the father of Martin Luther King, when he first went to the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, the church was really having financial just woes. It was very difficult. And they had anonymous giving, and he said, this amounts to anonymous non-giving. So he started publishing how much everybody gave to the church. They doubled the budget in a year. Like, we could so do that here, couldn't we? What do you do when nobody's looking? What goes on inside your head? What are your thoughts? No one knows them. No one can see them. You don't report on them to others. What do you think when you see other people? What do you think when all kinds of images bombard you? What goes on inside your head? What goes on inside your heart that you never tell anybody about? What goes on in the dark? How should we say it? The one who is poor and hurting. Does anything go on in you with respect to the poor and hurting in the dark that nobody knows about and that you get no credit for? Or let's put it this way. Maybe the one out there who is poor and hurting out in the dark is you. After all, it's December. And in December, as best I can tell, riding around my neighborhood and everywhere I go, everyone is having a blast at all times. In my neighborhood, there's nothing else that a light could be put on. Lights are on all the bushes, all the houses, all the trees, everywhere. Everyone seems to be going to parties. Everyone is having a blast. 'Tis the season to be jolly. And the problem with that, though, is that there are quite a few people in 'tis the season to be jolly who are lying in their beds in the dark. They're afraid. They're anxious. They're sad. They're lonely, not sure if they want to get out of bed the next morning, not sure if they can stand not sleeping tonight. It's really the whole point of Christmas, isn't it? Is that Jesus sneaks out of heaven in the dark and he comes down to be with us who are alone in the dark, and he does not come down to say, bad boy, bad boy. No, Jesus comes down to, he was just an infant. He couldn't say bad boy. He just came down to love us, to be with us. Whatever goes on inside your head, Jesus is there not to scold and to reprimand you, but to say, your life could be so much richer. Your life could be so much calmer. You could be so much more at peace. You could actually know that there is such a thing as mercy. Maybe you're sneaking around in the dark might actually be like the Pope or like St. Nicholas or like St. Francis, to go about doing some good. What happens in the dark when nobody else is looking? I don't know what to tell you to do after dark when nobody else is looking. We have some people, they sneak out of their homes and they go to Elizabeth House or to Hawthorne Place and they stay with the homeless overnight. We don't put a big placard up here to announce who did that and give them a trophy or something. Who knows these things? You go on the webpage, you make a pledge to the church. Maybe you're in the dark and you just don't know what to do in the dark, and when nobody's looking, you just fall down on your knees, and maybe you even shed a tear or two and you plead to God for some mercy, for some aid, for a little bit of comfort. Maybe you're alone in the dark and you know somebody else who's hurting. You think of them, you think, I know her, I know him. He might be awake in the dark too, and you send him a text message, send him an email. Say, I love you, I care about you, I'm thinking about you. Maybe through one of our programs, you've met somebody who's actually a poor person. Instead of just pitying them in a distance, you actually know them, you actually know their name. You might actually know their phone number. You could text them and say, I'm thinking about you here in the dark. Maybe you're riding around, instead of admiring the decorations of a house, you stop and you just say a prayer for the person that lives in that house. No one will know. No one will know. And that's really the beauty of life with God, right? It's not about what people know. It's not about what you get credit or glory for. It's what nobody knows. And it's good. It's rich and wonderful, actually, because nobody knows. Because Jesus knows. I mean, he is the champion of sneaking out in the dark to do good, to love us, to be with us. Are you righteous? And you might answer, not very, but I want to be. And it begins in the dark when nobody's looking.